Okay guys, today we're going to be doing 42. Sorry to listen to my awful voice, but hopefully you'll get done pretty quick with this. At any point if you get confused, pause it, rewind, pause it if you need to catch up on writing stuff down. There's 4 important theorems, and so here's the first one. It's called corresponding angle postulate, and it has to do with corresponding angles. It makes sense. What it says is corresponding angles are congruent. So it's really important that you know that corresponding angles are congruent. Now, yesterday you did corresponding alternating interior, alternating exterior, consecutive interior. Now, today we're dealing with parallel lines. Remember, they're marked with our little triangles. Only on parallel lines is all of this true. So today's whole section is on parallel lines. If I have 2 parallel lines, then the corresponding angles are congruent. And you can kind of see how that makes sense, right? Any of these all congruent only when they're on parallel lines. Okay, we're going to do one proof, but this is our only proof. It says in the figure, measure of angle 11 equals 51. I'm going to start with that because it's been given. Tell which postulate or theorems you use. And so we're going to write a quick proof. If measure of angle 11 is 51 degrees, I want to find the measure of angle 15. Well, 15 and 11 have a special relationship. They're corresponding angles. And they're on parallel lines. So because it's parallel lines, we can use our corresponding angle postulate. The names are really easy. It just has postulate or theorem at the end. Corresponding angle postulate, which says the corresponding angles are congruent. So these 2 angles are congruent. Unfortunately, I have an equal sign, so I'm going to have to swap over. Some of you are forgetting this. Don't forget when you have an equal sign that you need the measure of the angle. I'll swap over from congruent to equal is definition of congruent angles. And well, I know measure of angle 11 is 51, so I can plug that in. Plugging that in, of course, is substitution. Now, you would not have to write a 2-column proof to solve this. I hope you can say, oh, that's 51 and this is congruent. The answer is 51. But it explained which theorem, so we use corresponding angle postulate, definition of congruent angles, and then substitution. Of course, you could use symmetric to swap this, but you don't have to because it didn't say which order it had to be in. In the figure, so I'm going to erase and start over. In this figure, again, this is 51, but it wants us this time to find 16. Well, we already determined the measure of angle 15 is 51, and we knew that because of the corresponding angle postulate. Well, if this is 51, 15 and 16 have a special relationship. They're vertical angles and vertical angles are congruent. Therefore, 16 is 51 as well by the vertical angle theorem that we talked about in last chapter. Okay, awesome. I'd like for you to pause this and work this one on your own, and then start it back to check your work. Okay, find the measure of angle 22 if 18 is 42, and it tells you they're parallel, which is really important. So if this is 42, this is 42. So that's your answer. But why? Well, because there's corresponding angles, and corresponding angles are congruent according to the corresponding angle postulate. Then it says to find 25. Well, 22 and 25 are the same, and if 22 is 42, then 25 is as well. It's 42 degrees. We didn't put our units there because of the vertical angle. Yeah. Great. Okay. 3 more postulates, and again, these are really, really important. All of them, these are theorems, so they have theorem at the end, but all you have to do is stick postulate or theorem at the end of the names. Alternating interior, consecutive interior, alternating exterior. We just did the fact, the corresponding, right? And for corresponding, we learn with parallel lines. Remember, all this is with parallel lines. Corresponding angles are congruent. Alternating interior angles are congruent. Alternating exterior angles are congruent. This is the weird one. Consecutive interior, and you can look, 1 and 2 are consecutive interior. Do they look congruent? That's obtuse and that's acute, so they can't be. They are supplementary. Okay, so it's really important that you remember that corresponding angles congruent. So corresponding is congruent, alternating interiors congruent, alternating exteriors congruent. But consecutive interior, also called same side interior, those are supplementary. So it's really important that you remember these 4 things, and this only works with parallel lines. Okay, we have kind of this crazy picture, and some of these pictures are crazy. I highly recommend you marking everything and drawing on it if it helps. We have floor tiles at Michelle's house. Measure of angle 2 is 125. And it says find the measure of angle 3, 4, and 1. Tons of ways to do this, okay? But if this is 125, what's the relationship with 1 and 2? Well, angle 1 and angle 2 are a linear pair. So they're supplementary, so they add up to 180. So the measure of angle 1 has to be 180 minus the measure of angle 2. And we get 55. Okay. Now floor tiles are laid very nicely so that they're parallel. So I'm going to call these parallel. And you can do it several different ways, but if I know 1 is 55, well, 1 and 4 are what relationship? They're alternating exterior, and alternating exterior angles are congruent. So that makes the measure of angle 4 also equal to 55. And then you could say, hey, but angle 3 is a linear pair with 4, so if this is 55, this is 120. And we can, of course, check. There's tons of ways, right? This angle 2 and 3 are alternating interior, so they should be congruent. Oh, look, they are. We could check another way and say, hey, angle 1 and angle 4. Oh, no, we already did that. Yeah, so that's how you check this one way. And then linear pair, alternating exterior congruent, alternating interior congruent. Perfect. Pause and work this one on your own. Using this picture up here, forget anything learned before, you can erase that. And then figure out what it's talking about. Okay, if the measure of angle 2 is 125, well, we just did that, right? Measure of angle 4, this is supplementary to this, so this is 55. 55 is congruent to 55 down here because they're alternating exterior. Okay, awesome. We have some parallel lines. It tells us the measure of angle 5 and the measure of angle 7. Well, we have to figure out the relationship of those. We have two parallel lines cut by a transversal. I hope you can see that they're corresponding angles. I know they're corresponding because this is on the bottom left and this is on the bottom left, so they're in the same spot. They're corresponding, and corresponding angles on parallel lines are congruent. Well, congruent means equal, so I'm going to set an equal. And you can solve for x. I'm going to subtract x over, and I'm going to add 10 over, and we get x 25. Perfect. Why don't you pause this and go ahead and try to work this one on your own? It says, hey, 4 and 8. Okay, 4 and 8 are not that special, but they don't have a special relationship, but 8 and 6 do. 8 and 6 are congruent, and 6 and 4 are supplementary, so that means 8 and 4 are supplementary. So these two are supplementary. Let me give you a hint. They're on parallel lines cut by a transversal. They're either congruent or they're supplementary. So like this angle is congruent to this because they're vertical angles. These are vertical angles. These are alternating interior. These are alternating exterior. All four of those are congruent. And then the same here. So it's like you have two sets of angles, one set acute, that would be my orange, and one set obtuse, and both sets are congruent. So it doesn't matter, like this angle and this angle have no special relation, but I have one of one and one of the others. They're supplementary. All the angles here, all 8 of these are either congruent or they're supplementary. So these two are supplementary, so I'm going to take this and add them up to 180, and we'll distribute. I'm going to combine like terms. And at the same time, I'm going to add 100 over, and y is 35. Great. Now pause and work, check your progress on your own. Okay, it says 1 and 2. Well, 1 and 2 are alternating exterior. So I know these 1 and 2 are alternating exterior. You can see on these parallel lines, it helps me to draw it out a lot. So they're alternating exterior, so they're congruent. You could also use the fact that it says something about 2 and 3. So I have this y here. So if I wanted to find y, which I'm not, but 2 and 3 are corresponding, so these are also congruent because they're corresponding. So just so you know for your homework, if I were to need to find y, once I find x, which I'll do here in a second, I would plug back in here, then these two are the same. But these two are congruent, so I'm going to say that. I'm going to distribute and solve, and we get that x is 12. So hopefully you can check your work and you got that right. And like I said, we could plug that back in, and so I would say measure angle 2 equals this, and that is 114. So that means the measure of angle 3 equals 114, and I know you didn't have to do this, but you'll need to know how to do it. And the measure of angle 3, it told me was this, and I could solve for y, and y is 20. Okay, one last theorem. If it's perpendicular, remember I told you like all four of these angles are congruent and all four of these angles are congruent. But if it's perpendicular, that's 90, that's 90, that's 90, that's 90, that's 90, that's 90, that's everything is 90, so you have 8 90-degree angles. So you either have where all of them are 90, or you have like what I was drawing above, where you have 4 sets of obtuse that are congruent and 4 sets of acute that are congruent. Okay, you have 3-2 homework that's due Monday as well as your daily. So work on that and email me if you have any questions. Good job.